Ford versus Ferrari. This is the story of how the Ford Motor Company designed a car that went on to beat even Ferrari in racing. The story begins in 1963, a time when Ford's car sales were dropping day by day. Seeing this problem, Ford's owner Henry Ford halted car production and gathered all his employees. He told them, "If things keep going like this, our company will soon go bankrupt and the factories will shut down. So if you want to keep your jobs, bring me an idea that can turn our falling sales around. If you can't, then you don't deserve to work at Ford." To save their jobs, the company's vice president Lee Iacocca came up with a suggestion. He said, "If we want to increase our car sales, we need to start thinking like Ferrari. Right now, Ferrari participates in high-level racing competitions and keeps winning. People who buy a Ferrari feel like they're part of that victory. But if Ford enters the racing world and wins a major competition, we'll create a whole new identity for Ford, one that today's young generation will be excited to buy into." However, the company president wasn't convinced by Lee's idea. He said, "It'll take us at least 10 years to build a racing team like Ferrari." In response, Lee informed everyone that Ferrari was nearly bankrupt, and if Henry Ford wanted, he could simply buy Ferrari. Henry Ford liked this idea. So, to close the deal, he sent a team to Italy to meet with Enzo Ferrari, the founder of Ferrari. Lee told Enzo, "Our boss, Mr. Henry Ford, wants to buy 90% of your company's shares. If you agree to this deal, Ford will have control over Ferrari, and your company will do what our boss says." Everything was going smoothly, until Lee said one more thing that ruined the whole deal. He added, "According to the terms, Ford will also control Ferrari's racing team and decide whether or not Ferrari will participate in the Le Mans race every year." The Le Mans race is a prestigious racing competition that lasts for 24 hours straight. Simply put, it's like the World Cup of car racing, and Ferrari had been its reigning champion. When Enzo Ferrari heard that he wouldn't have full freedom to compete in Le Mans anymore, his anger hit the roof. Enzo Ferrari, burning with rage, turns to the Ford team and says, "Go back to your ugly little factory and tell your fat boss, Henry Ford, that his brain is smaller than a pig's, and he'll never be as great as his father." After this brutal insult, the Ford team returns to America and reports everything to Henry Ford II. Hearing it all, Henry is furious. He makes a bold decision. Ford will now enter the Le Mans race and beat Ferrari at their own game to avenge this humiliation. We're introduced to a man sitting in a doctor's clinic, Carroll Shelby. He was once a legendary race car driver, and in fact, the only American to have ever won the 24-hour Le Mans race. But today, he's there for a checkup. Shelby has a heart condition. He can't do anything that raises his heartbeat too much, so he had to quit racing years ago. These days, he owns a car design company called Shelby American, where he builds sports cars and manages small racing events. Meet Ken Miles, a former Army officer, a mechanical genius, and a fearless race car driver. He runs a small garage with his wife and young son. Ken is passionate about racing. It's his entire life. But he's also known for his hot temper and blunt attitude, which often gets him into trouble. Still, he's got a good heart. Back to Ford's vice president, Lee Iacocca. He meets Carroll Shelby and tells him about Ford's plan to compete in Le Mans. He says, "We want you to build a car for us and race it because you're the only American who's won Le Mans before." Shelby replies, "I quit racing years ago. Besides, winning Le Mans is no joke. You need a car that's not only fast, but light, and can survive 24 hours of brutal racing." Lee explains that Henry Ford is ready to spend whatever it takes to win. Shelby agrees to design the car, but says he won't drive it due to his heart issues. However, he knows someone who can, Ken Miles. Shelby and Ken go way back. They used to race together, and there's no one better suited for this job than Ken. Shelby meets Ken and tells him about Ford's Le Mans project. They have only 90 days to design a car that can beat Ferrari. First, Ken refuses. He doesn't trust Ford's team, saying, "They're all yes men who only care about pleasing their boss. They'll never let me do things my way." But when Shelby tells him that he'll be paid $200 a day, Ken starts to reconsider. His garage has been shut down, and he's behind on loan payments. He had even given up racing, his one true passion, just to make ends meet. So when Shelby offers him this chance, Ken finally agrees. Next day, Shelby and Ken arrive at the Los Angeles airport, where Ford's prototype car, the GT40, is ready for testing. Ken takes the GT40 for a spin, After just a few laps, he finds several flaws. He tells Shelby, "This car doesn't have the power of a real race car. And it's so heavy, once you hit 200 miles per hour, you're not driving it, it's driving you." From that point on, days go by with constant testing. Ken and Shelby's team work tirelessly, fixing flaw after flaw. They replace the engine to boost power. To make the car lighter, they redesign many parts with aluminum. One day, Ford's president, Leo Beebe, visits to inspect the car. While he's impressed with its performance, he doesn't like Ken at all. He tells Shelby, "Ken Miles won't drive for Ford at Le Mans. He's not a Ford kind of guy, too hot-headed, too reckless. If he says the wrong thing on race day, it could ruin our company's image." Shelby defends Ken, saying, "He's the one who built this car. No one knows it better, and no one else can drive it like he can." Shelby tries to explain to Leo Beebe, "Driving a race car isn't child's play. Only someone who understands the machine should be behind the wheel." But Leo ignores his words. He gives his orders and walks away. Later, when Shelby informs Ken Miles that the company has decided not to let him race because of his bad image, Ken is deeply disappointed. After all, he had poured his soul into this project, worked day and night to make the car race ready. And now, he wouldn't even be allowed to drive it? But instead of getting angry at Shelby, Ken shows maturity. Before leaving, he simply says, "Tell your drivers, keep an eye on the gearbox. And during the daytime, ease off the throttle, or the engine will overheat." The next day, the 24 hours of Le Mans begins. Ken, left out of the action, sits at home listening to the race commentary on his radio. Ford had entered 3 cars into the race. In the beginning, everything seemed to go well. But just as Ken predicted, disaster struck. Everything falls apart. The gearbox is jammed. The engines overheated. One by one, all 3 Ford cars were forced to retire from the race within the first few hours. It was a crushing defeat. Henry Ford's wrath. Back in America, a furious Henry Ford II summons Shelby to his office. He stares him down and says, "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't fire you and your entire team right now." Shelby replies calmly but firmly, "We may have lost the race, but for the first time in Le Mans history, a car touched 200 miles per hour. And that car was a Ford. And trust me, that's enough to put fear in Enzo Ferrari's heart. Now he knows we're not backing down. Not until we win." After hearing Shelby's passionate words, Henry Ford finally gives in. He decides to give Shelby and his team one more chance. Shelby heads straight to Ken Miles' house to bring him back into the project. Before Shelby can even finish his sentence, Ken punches him in the face. The two of them tumble into a friendly fistfight, rolling on the ground, throwing playful punches, and yelling like old friends. Eventually, both collapsed from exhaustion, lying on the grass, breathing heavily, laughing like brothers. That's when Shelby convinces Ken to come back. And from the very next day, the two get back to work. Ken spends long hours every day testing the car, pushing it to its limits. The team had already swapped out the engine, but the car was still too heavy, making it hard to reach top speeds. And the brakes? They weren't strong enough to handle braking at 200 miles per hour, 320 kilometers per hour. One wrong move and the driver could crash fatally. But Shelby's team respected Ken. They took note of every detail he mentioned and kept refining the car, faster, lighter, stronger. One night, Shelby gets a call from Lee Iacocca. Lee tells him, "Henry Ford just made Leo Beebe the new head of the racing division. Tomorrow, he's coming with Mr. Ford to inspect the car. And remember, Leo hates Ken Miles. He'll do whatever it takes to get him out of the team." The test drive that changed everything. The next day, Henry Ford II arrives to see the car for himself. Shelby welcomes him and begins explaining the GT40 specs. Suddenly, Leo interrupts and says, "Shelby, I need to speak to you, alone." Shelby agrees and takes Leo into his office. But before Leo can even speak, Shelby locks him inside and walks away. He returns to Henry Ford and says, "Sir, let me take you for a ride. Let me show you what this car can do. A ride he'll never forget." Shelby floors the gas. The GT40 roars to life, speeding across the track like a rocket. The power, the noise, the raw speed, it's too much for Henry Ford to take. By the time Shelby slows down, Ford is tearing up in the passenger seat. He finally realizes, this is what it takes to build a race car. Not boardrooms, not meetings, guts, sweat, and fire. That day, Ford sees what Shelby sees. Ken Miles belongs in this car. And now so does Ford in Le Mans. Shelby turns to Henry Ford and insists, "Sir, no one understands this car better than Ken Miles." Ford still isn't convinced. So Shelby proposes a deal. Let Ken drive the car in next week's Daytona 24-hour race. If he wins, he drives for us at Le Mans, no questions asked. Ford grumbles but accepts. The clock is ticking. Daytona, February 1966. Daytona is a brutal 24-hour battle, just like Le Mans. Ford enters two teams. Team Shelby, Ken Miles behind the wheel. Team Leo Beebe, Ford's corporate favorites. Early on, Beebe's cars lead. Why? Ken is holding steady under 6,000 RPM, worried the GT40 will spin out if he pushes harder. With only a few hours left, Shelby realizes they're going to lose. He scribbles 7,000 RPM on a board and flashes it at Ken. Ken understands. He buries the throttle, screaming past 7,000 RPM. Dangerous, maybe deadly, but it's all or nothing. He overtakes Ford's other driver, opens a huge gap, and wins Daytona. The deal is sealed. Ken Miles will drive at Le Mans. Le Mans, June 18, 1966. The day everyone's been waiting for. 3 Fords versus 2 Ferraris. Engines rumbling on the grid for PM start. Ken's problem right out of the gate. His door won't latch. It's flapping, distracting him every corner. After a shaky first lap, he dives into the pits, shouting for help. A crewman fixes the door the quickest way he can. One good whack with a hammer, and Ken rockets back out, soon setting the fastest lap of the race. Shelby's crew is thrilled. Leo Beebe is not. Hours grind by. Night falls. Then rain, heavy, blinding rain. Ken and the lead Ferrari trade places lap after lap. But Ken's brakes are shot, worn down to metal. He eases off, nurses the car back to the pits. Shelby's crew yanks the destroyed brake assemblies and bolts on fresh ones. Ferrari's team protests. Changing parts mid-race is against the rules. A race steward asks Shelby to show the regulation. Ken snaps back. "Show us where that's written. There is no such rule." Ferrari's gambit fails. New brakes on. Ken tears out of the pits and back into the storm. The final battle, Le Mans 1966. Even though Ferrari had only one car left on track, it was still trying to catch up to Ken Miles. The pressure was high. The Ferrari driver was doing everything to stop Ken from taking the lead. So Ken took another risk. He pushed the GT40 to 7,000 RPM again, just like at Daytona. He quickly closed the gap. Seeing this, the Ferrari driver tried to do the same, pushing his car to 7,000 RPM too. But the Ferrari engine couldn't handle it. It blew up. The car veered off track and was out of the race. Now both Ferrari cars were gone, and Ford was in complete control. All 3 GT40s leading the race with Ken Miles in first place. History or heartbreak? When Henry Ford II hears the news, he's thrilled. Finally, revenge against Ferrari. Finally, redemption. But then, Leo Beebe approaches him with a brilliant idea. He says, "Sir, what if all 3 Ford cars crossed the finish line together? It would be a historic moment." Ford likes the sound of that and gives his approval. Leo runs to Shelby and tells him the plan. Shelby is furious. "Ken's worked harder than anyone. He deserves this win. I'm not going to ask him to throw it away." But when Ken returns to the pit, Shelby explains everything and leaves the decision to him. Ken's final lap. Ken goes out for the final lap. He's flying, breaking his own lap record. But at the last moment, he lifts off the gas and slows down, letting the other 2 Ford cars catch up. All 3 GT40s cross the finish line together. It's a picture-perfect ending. But for Ken, it's heartbreak. The twist. Despite finishing first, Ken Miles is not declared the winner. Why? Because Ford's other driver, Bruce McLaren, had started the race a few meters behind Ken. And under Le Mans rules, the car that covers the most distance is the official winner. Shelby is stunned. He realizes the truth. Leo Beebe knew this all along. He just wanted to make sure Ken didn't win. Ken is disappointed, sure, but he doesn't complain. Instead, he looks at Shelby and says, "Thank you for giving me the chance to race." Then he adds, "We may have lost today, but next year we will be the Le Mans champions." The tragic end. A few months later, during a high-speed test run, Ken Miles' brakes fail. He crashes. The car explodes. Ken Miles dies on the track. It's a devastating loss. Epilogue. In the final scene, we're told, Ken Miles was later inducted into the Hall of Fame for his contribution to racing. And from 1966 to 1969, Ford won the Le Mans race 4 years in a row. The GT40 became a legend, and so did Ken. Clapperboard, and with that, this incredible story comes to an end. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be back soon with another amazing story. Until then, be safe and keep chilling.